sufriendo del amor. Mi neshama se escurece, sufriendo del amor.
Écoute, voilà, allez. Voyez, j'y vais là, tu vois, si, je vais te dire comment en arabe, parce que... Ok. مساء الخير واهلا بكم في المعهد الفرنسي. انا هكلم شويه بالانجليزي وبعد الاستاذ عباس هكلم بالعربي كمان. Dear colleagues in France, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this special Esna Day at the French Institute, which has been led by our colleague Amr Bagat, whom I would like to thank warmly for all his work at this occasion. I'm also much grateful to Dr. Hicham Elaiti and to Professor Christian Leitz to have been able to free themselves from their many obligations to join Ifao at this occasion and to present the fantastic new work which is those last years made at the Temple of Esna. Esna, as you all know, is just one of the most beautiful sites in Egypt. It is also a place that was much studied by the French Institute in the 1960s and 1970s under the decisive impulse of Serge Saudron, first as a scientific member of the French Institute and then director of our institute. It is a pleasure to see that the work is now resuming in this area, so giving a compliment to what was half a century ago. I would also like to welcome the member and director of the Takwin organization, the director of Takwin Egypt, Karim Ibrahim, and the director of Takwin in Esna, Mohsen Mihail, to be with us today. And this organization is most efficient in the valorization of all the aspects of the Esna heritage, as was the original idea of Serge Saudron himself. So if Dr. Abbas is still there? Escape for us? Okay, so he hides somewhere. Okay, so come and join us.
اهلا وسهلا وشكرا على الحضور كثيرا طبعا لتنظيم هذه الورشة التدريبية مع المؤسسة المصرية وخاصة التكوين والزملاء من الوزارات، وكما قال الأخ والزميل بيير تالي مدير الدراسات، فيساعدنا تنظيم هذه الورشة، وشكرا للحضور وإن شاء الله وشكرا للحضور. وكيس كو جو اجوتي وهذا مهم جدا لأننا في المعهد الفرنسي عندنا اهتمام كبير للتعاون مع الزملاء المصريين وخاصة الأثريين والمؤسسات والوزارة. شكرا للحضور. الحمد لله.
شكرا جزيلا يا أستاذ عباس. And I think we give the floor to Florence, who will present us the heritage of Esna, the work on Esna by Serge Saudron.
So I will present you the work of the Ifao edition to Esna during the former years. So thank you very much to be here for this special day. So Esna has a special resonance at the Ifao for several reasons. Indeed, the site is intimately linked to Serge Sonneron, Egyptologist and mythic director of the Institute, who devoted a big part of his research, scientific and personal interest to Esna. The result is a rich output of publication printed at the Ifao. Sonneron's publication of the Greco-Roman temple are, of course, a major work that the Ifao carried forward until 2009. It is part of a specific tradition in the Institute and was carried out in a facilitated framework thanks to the printing tools that the Ifao has been able to develop since its creation and its installation at Munira through its printing house. It lies at the heart of reflection and scientific approach that are still highly visible in the actual current research. But the IFAO's involvement doesn't stop there. As much as for its temple, the Institute has been quite actively involved in the publication of other information and other aspects of the city of Esna and its region, thus covering a broad chronological spectrum that illustrates all the historical richness of the site. In my lecture, I shall try to present these few points, which illustrate the IFAO's extensive involvement in disseminating knowledge about Esna. Donc, concerning the publication of the Esna Temple, Sonneron's interest in the Esna Temple is based on a contradictory observation. The site, and more broadly the region, has been curiously neglected by research, even though there were reach of a considerable and accessible number of sources and documents of study. As for an example, in the early 50s, when Sonneron began his work, the temple was in a fairly advanced state of disrepair. In stark contrast, the state of other major Greco-Roman temples, such as Philae, Edfu, or Komombo, or Dendera, which have already been extensively investigated by researchers at the time. In a way, it was its status of laissé-pour-compte that led Sonneron to come and work there, to do justice to a monument and a site whose epigraphic, historical, and scientific interest has been immediately identified by the scientist. Sonneron himself says in the introduction of his first published volume of the temple that he obtains official work permits without any difficulty given to the Esna's poor reputation. His work began in 1951. He carried out a number of campaigns that culminated in the publication of 8 volumes, 2 of which was published posthumously, according to an extensive publication program. So in the first volume of Esna, published in 1959, Sonneron gives a general presentation of the site and of the temple and outlines his publication program. So he planned to publish 3 volumes for publishing the text and the vignette of the temple, 2 volumes devoted to the architectural study, 1 or 2 volumes for photographic coverage of the temple, 1 volume for indices, and 1 volume on Latopolitan epigraphy and paleography. And by this time, 4 campaigns have already been carried out, and the epigraphic work was well advanced, and Sonneron was already aware of the interests, but also of the difficulties that editing and publishing the temple would be. This work plan will be regularly updated and presented in the introduction of the various publications dedicated to Esna. In the end, 5 volumes have been dedicated to the publication of all the texts of the temple, published between 63 and 75, and posthumously in 2009, thanks to the editorial work of Josham Alof, based on the manuscript of Sonneron. So Esna 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7. In addition to this sum, 2 thematic syntheses have been published in 2 other volumes. So Esna 5, published in 62, on Esna's religious festival in the late period, and Esna 8, published posthumously in 82 on figurative writings. This publication highlights the complexity of the writings and the hieroglyphs used in the temple, and feature that sets it apart from other Greco-Roman temples. So this aspect is regularly emphasized by Sonoran in his edition, and explains the conception of a volume specifically dedicated to it, so Esna 8. But this complexity implies a big difficulty in the preparation of the text and the layout of the books. It was necessary to be able to reproduce the hieroglyphs in all their nuance and subtlety. In addition to the logistical, financial, and scientific support provided to Sonoran to carry out his work, the Ifao was able to support the publication of this particular temple precisely because of the presence of the printing house at the institute. So as soon as the Ifao was founded in 1880, its director, Maspero, had the idea of adding a small printing house to publish the work of the member and the researcher. It's the arrival of Émile Chassina that made this project a reality. The printing house was founded in 1898 and moved to its current place in 1997. At the beginning, the printing house will benefit from the hieroglyph fonts available in the Imprimerie Nationale of France. But these fonts were far sufficient to reproduce all the hieroglyphs that were being studied and finished at this time. Indeed, the Ifao soon began publishing the Greco-Roman temple, so Edfu, Dendera, Komombo, and had to be able to deliver the multitude of texts engraved on their walls. Chassina, who has been originally trained as a printer, began to create by himself his own fonts, which will be progressively updated according to the needs and to publications, always with the aim of reproducing, transcribing, and transmitting this unique Egyptian text as effectively as possible. Sorry. The publication from the Esna Temple are the fruit of legacy and will themselves contribute to enriching the Ifao fonts, which today owns a catalogue of over 8,000 hieroglyph characters. The great advantage was that it was possible to create and check the signs on site. But because these hieroglyph fonts, even precise as they are, remain standardized, Sonoran decided to develop an hybrid publishing method mixing several techniques to the text in its architectural and general context. So each scene is reproduced in a detailed drawing close to the printed hieroglyph text with numbered lines of text. The scenes are placed in panels that show the totality of the scene on a given wall, useful for the overall understanding of the rites and the articulation of the scene between them. Details can be shown on a larger scale if required. Hieroglyph texts are printed, but can be enhanced with facsimile depending on the layout of the original or the shape of some cryptographic signs. And to compensate the standardized hieroglyphs, which make it easier for the reader to fit his way through the text, but differs from the original arrangement of the signs in the relation to each other, Sonoran's idea was to embellish the publication with a rich photographical coverage. And all these elements were connected by a system of vignette and scene numbering. In both form and content, Sonoran's systematic approach to the text, his analysis of the temple's hieroglyph system and the publication methodology he was able to implement at the Ifao, he marked a turning point in Ptolemaic temple studies and Egyptological philology, thanks to his work on the Esna Temple. Under the impulsion of Chasina, who pioneered the development of printed hieroglyphs, and the first one to propose a systematic edition of Greco-Roman temples using this method. So previously, texts were only reproduced in photographic or in facsimile form. And thanks to Sonoron's efforts to establish a complete global publishing system for these temples at Esna, the Ifao became part of a tradition and a reference for Egyptological publication and epigraphic studies. Beyond Esna, the Institute continues to invest heavily in this kind of research, which is a scientific priority of the Ifao. Several temples are currently being studied by the support of Ifao and published at the printing house, such as Sodendera, Komombo, Medamud, Der El Shewit, or Atribis, printed at the printing house, Ifao. And Sonoron's work at Esna also opens up a new field of research in Egyptology, in which Ifao is also heavily involved, the paleographic studies. To illustrate this, let me mention the hieroglyphic paleography series launched and supported by Dimitri Mex and Ifao, whose first volume was devoted to the architrave of the Temple of Esna, in particular because of their iconographic, pictorial, and paleographic richness, as well as we shall see in the afternoon, in the presentation of this afternoon. But Ifao was not only involved in the publication of the Esna Temple. Its activities also extended to other areas in the city and the region, and to other times than the Greco-Roman Egypt, thanks to the investment once again of Sovereign and several of the Institute researchers. In that way, since the beginning of the work of Sonoron at Esna, the aim clearly stated in the paper Les 9e et 10e campagnes archéologiques à Esna, was to deliver a total history of the locality. Thus, Sonoron wrote, since the beginning of our work at Esna, we have wanted to be able to proceed one day with an attempt at a total history on a privileged sector where human presence never seems to have been interrupted, from prehistoric times to the present day. There is here a continuity which is certainly neither rare nor strange in Egypt, but which attracts attention by the abundance of evidence left by each monument of its history. These elements are set out in BIFAO 67 in a fundamental paper insofar as it covers the area in a broad dimension and opens up considerable research prospects. All this highlights, for example, the Christian period in the region through the presentation of the monasteries and hermitages located near the town. And these campaigns presented in the BIFAO 67 inaugurated the publication of the Christian Hermitage of the Esna Desert, which were published in 4 volumes in the FIFAO 29 series in 72 by Sonoron, Jean Jacquet, and Hélène Jacquet-Gordon. Furthermore, the mural painting of Esna Desert Couvents were published in 75 by Jules Leroy. And the parietal inscription of the Dar al-Shuhada and Dar al-Fawri monasteries of Esna were published in the same year in BIFAO 75 by René-Georges Coquin. But also, this paper presents some aspect and material of the Islamic movements in the city that have been spotted by Sonoron during the campaigns. This information has since been supplemented by 2 papers published in Annales Islamologiques, presenting the architectural aspect of the caravanserai of Esna, dating from 1695, and located not far from the temple, in the town itself, and the more recent mausoleum of Sheikh Umar and Khalil, located in a small Muslim cemetery close to the city, on the left bank of the Nile, near the Dairir al-Shuhada monastery. But there is still a lot of research to be done in this history, on the history of the city. And finally, the region in prehistoric time was also presented. So this study was, Debono was entrusted with this study by Sonoran in 1968. The first results were also published in the BIFAO 67, and they opened notably the way for research into Adaima, an important site in the region located 8 kilometers from Esna, and in which Ifao was also involved through an archaeological program and several publications. So all this work published in the Ifao are indelibly linked to Serge Sonneron, who opened the way for studies on Esna and showed all its potential. They enable us to appreciate the breadth, the richness, and the depth of the history, architecture, and archaeology of the city and its region, reflecting the richness of its temple. In addition, this research has opened up new fields and continue to provide methodological models for epigraphic and philological studies. The IFAO's contribution is thus fundamental, providing a base on which current international research can build. Thank you for your attention.
C'est celui-là.
Je vais passer seulement le...
Tu remontes tout en haut. Attends. C'est là que j'appuie. Là. So good afternoon, everyone. I would like to take you now on a journey into what can be described, best described as the Ifao adventure in the Esna region. An adventure that has lasted more than 20 years ago and which is linked to the personality of a researcher we already spoke about, and that will become the director of Ifao, Serge Sonneron. He had originally come to Esna to study the Temple of Khnum as part of a doctoral thesis, but he would come to be interested in all the historical periods that the city had known, its more recent monuments, its inhabitants, their custom, and their skill. Through his archive, we will highlight the singularity of his scientific approach to achieve what he called a total history of Esna, as Florence already spoke about. These archives we kept here represent several meters of many kind of documentation. They are kept in the archives and are available, of course, to any researchers on requests. So the adventure of Sonneron began in the mid-20th century when, as a young scientific member appointed to the Ifao at the age of 24, it was very, very young, he initiated a significant project that would form an integral part of his whole work, the recording and of the text and the scenes of the Khnum temples and the study of its architecture. Alors, the genesis, the starting point of this project is known by some text he wrote in the first book about Esna, where he said, the indifference, the careless way in which this magnificent hypostyle hall was left to rot under the ruins, and the lack of mention of Esna in scientific books and guidebooks intrigued me. There was a strange contradiction between the limitedness of our actual knowledge and the mass of documentation that seems accessible to anyone who wanted to make use of it. So he arrived in Esna, as Florence told you, in 1951, having obtained the requisite permit without any difficulties, as no other parties were interested in the site. He conducted a total of 10 campaigns in and around Esna until 1979. In his work, he was always supported by the Supreme Council of Antiquity, represented by 2 inspectors that he mentioned in his book, and he thanks for their help, Labib Habashi and Yaqub Farah. So the initial 8 campaigns were primarily dedicated to comprehensive architecture, epigraphic, and photographic survey of Esna Temple. During this period, Serge Sonneron gets a substantial corpus of data on the monument. Some of these data documents were used for the publication of the text and scenes in the 8 volumes printed at Ifao Press. But the archive contains all of Sonneron's preparatory work, including handwritten hieroglyph transcription with correction, analysis, translation, as well as many later correspondence with colleagues and the director of Ifao. This archive provides a comprehensive overview of Sonneron's methodology, including the challenges and difficulties he faced as a researcher. These archives reflect an intellectual construction of which we are only aware of the outcome. They provide insight into the choices and actual practices of research, the phases in the construction of a thought, the dynamics of idea, and an ingenuity guided by a way of doing things that gave rise to the researchers' decision to present their findings to the public. Moreover, according to Sonneron, a publication plan, as you saw before with Florence, he planned to publish 1 or 2 volumes of photographic plates. This complete photographic survey of the temple was supposed to compensate the limitation and disadvantage of the typography. The plan was also to add a booklet devoted to Esna paleography. This would have include reproduction of the most common form of the signs in drawings and classification. We still possess the files of drawing of the sign by category that were supposed to be used for his paleography. We see that Sonneron took care to document all variants of each sign that could not be rendered, given in a book, in a typographical version of a book. As you can see here, with a sparrow, for which he gives different form and drawing. The thousands of photographs in the form of negatives and photographic prints preserved in the archives testify to the importance of this aspect of the temple's publication. They are arranged by wall or column, sometimes glued into documentary cards. Sonneron produced a complete photographic coverage of the temple. Alors, how he used to do that? How he used what was the method he used for the photographic? He was doing this at night to avoid variation in the daylight. Using projectors powered by an electric generator. The aim was to produce photographs that would have the same final rendering, an important point for the homogeneity of a quality scientific publication. So to achieve this, he developed a simple solution with the help of a photographer. A lamp fixed to a wooden support, as you can see on the right, which ensured that the light source was always at the same distance from the wall and provided equal and constant light for each shot. A device associated with a metal frame into which a camera with 3 axes was inserted, complete the dispositives. You can see the example of this photo camera outside in the presentation. The device he created allowed the exact detail of each hieroglyphic signs to be revealed and each inscription to be photographed in 50 centimeters section. He does this, for example, for the column of text from the temple. He marks some point with the chalk on the text, as you can see here, for example, on the right here. On a regular interval on each text column, so the photographer only has to place his camera where he wants to take the picture. Each section is marked with a circular light, as you see on the top, that indicate the column number and the text number column. Here you have column number 15, column of text number 1 and number 2. It took for him 3 weeks of night work to complete the photographic coverage of the 18th column. The films were then developed in Cairo, and the shots were classified and grouped by column and line of shots. Alors we also have other kind of photographs that Sonron took during his stay in Esna Temple. Not only photographic about the sign and the scene, we also have photographing describing the adventure the whole enterprise presents. It took many pictures of the agility of the workers twirling on the beam to install the 12 meters high scaffolding. Here you have some picture of the rolling scaffoldings that were used to do the epigraphic survey on the exterior wall. Here you see some worker leveling the ground to be able to put the rolling scaffolding. He has also to clean some parts of the temple that were still full of debris, to be able to put his, as you see here, the scaffolding, which you can see is not very stable, of course. So the risk, we have also some pictures of the dispositive he creates inside the temple, because he doesn't have so much space to put the rolling scaffolding, so he creates those kind of tower of wood to be able to reach the top of the temple. Here you can see him taking some risk on the top of a column to get a better view of some hieroglyphs. And above all, we have many pictures of all the workers and their indispensable ingenuity in making this adventure possible. The photographs illustrate every stage of the works: installation of the tower, electrical cables, preparation of the camera, setting up the stands and projector, repairing the generator, etc. But studying the temple of Khnum was not Sonron's only occupation in Esna. When he wasn't at work, he used to walk inside the streets of the town and around. His passion for the region's history and culture grows out during those walks. He soon realized that he was in a privileged area where the human presence had never been interrupted since prehistoric time. At this point, his interest in the town took on an encyclopedic dimension. He wanted to develop a complete history of Esna. So he started by gathering documents that would help him understand more about the medieval history of the city. This included literary sources from geographers, chronicles, texts about the martyr of Esna, and travelers' accounts, all of which were really useful in researching the city's past. Copies of all these documents are kept in the archives in Ifao. This includes 5 bound volumes of manuscript copies on the life of the Christian martyr in Esna, some files containing extracts from travelers' accounts of Esna between the 16th century and the early 20th century. Sometimes those stories are linked with sketches of the cities. This past record in this text, Serge Sonron wanted to make it known with the help of archaeology. As early as 1967, he started surveying and excavating 3 Christian-era sites on the outskirts of the town of Esna. These sites were in danger due to agricultural policy, as the land was being reclaimed for cultivation. So we spoke already about those Christian monuments. You have two monasteries, Der Shohada and Der Fakuri, and he worked also on the Hermitage. The Der are located in the middle of the desert, on the outskirts of Esna. The mural painting, which probably date from the 12th and 13th century, are very rich, and the inscriptions lots get here. So Serge Sonneron soon realized the urgent need to carry out a campaign of photography and surveys to preserve traces of the paintings and texts that still survive inside the monuments. Because he was aware that there was the expansion of the farmland, and he also was witness of a disastrous restoration attempt by a priest from a neighboring village who destroyed some of the painting. So in the spring 1976 and 1978, Sonneron, the architects Georges Castel, Bernard Lantéric, and Jules Leroy took on the task of drawing up plans of the building and documenting the wall. So we keep all those documents, those graphic documents, here in the archives. And as Florence told you, the result was the publication of this book in 2 volumes. The Hermitage were also the subject of a 4-volume publication. Sonneron quickly noted that this ensemble, these monuments, were unique and unlike anything he knows. So it produced again a lot of documentation, many photos, many plans, many notes about those Hermitage. Could be useful for someone who wants to study those monuments. But Sonneron was also interested in the Islamic monuments inside the city of Esna, which he took the time to photograph. He also drew up a list of monuments of interest that were visible at his time, with note and description. During his surveys, he discovered that many houses of fairly recent appearance had a wooden lintel over their door, engraved with decorative motifs and sometimes with 2 rectangular or oval panels. Those panels bear most of the time the name of the owner and the dates of the foundation. More than 50 of these lintels were discovered during his surveys of the town. These lintels are, as you can see on the picture, not all of the same quality, and many were damaged. The inscription dates them from the 1850 and 1890. So he tried to get more information about those objects, and when he asked local residents about this elaborate object, he was told that no one does this kind of work anymore. We were in 1950. That it was an old job from grandfather's times, and now nobody can do it anymore. This is a plan he did of the city, where he marked all the things, interesting monuments he find. While he was exploring the town, suddenly he came across a big, impressive door with a fancy wooden lintel, as you can see here on the picture. Inside, there were about 40 rooms on 2 levels around an open-air courtyard, which looked like a caravanserai. When Sonneron visited the site, it was occupied by a carpenter workshop, while the first floor, which has been abandoned, was falling into disrepair. Fearing that this heritage might disappear, Sonneron asked the architects of Ifao, Georges Castel, to survey the building. A few years later, he published an article in the Annales Islamologiques. But Sonneron also documented a lot of other monuments in the city. We have many pictures. I can show you all of them today, but we have pictures of the mosque and several other documents that he found interesting to record. Sonneron took also advantage of his day off to discover the richness of traditional craftsmanship, what we would now call intangible cultural heritage. In his notes, he recounts On Friday, while the temple is overrun with tourists, we escape and set off through the village, hoping that the presence of visitors in the temple will drain all the village children and that we will have peace. He then visited the stalls and workshop of the manual trades operating in the town center. We were weavers' shop in particular, as you can see here with all this picture. He produced a real photographic reportage documentary showing the machine and the man in action. He also sketched street scenes and the daily activity of local residents. So to conclude, Serge Sonneron's archives are very rich when it's come to find information about the town of Esna in the 1950s. You can find information about its history, its tradition, the region's specialties in the country's long history. All these archives, I told you, are available in the Department of Archive in Ifao. And soon, we hope, inshallah, in September, that some of those documents will be online on our website. I show you what will look like this website, which is not available yet, but as I told you, in September, I hope it will be. It will be the website where all the pictures, the photographs of the archives of Ifao will be on display. We already plan to put all the photographs of the Knum temples, which are with a bibliographic reference of the scene. You have a geographical location on the map. You have some information that groups all the photographs inside the website. And you have also all the metadata exportable in various formats. Photographs can be downloaded without restriction and zoomed in high definition. So we already did that for the photographs of the Temple of Knum. It's around 12,000 photos that will be on display in September. And we also work on it for the monastery of Esna, the two there we spoke about, with the same idea, many information about it. You can download the image for free and use it according your needs, also with a big zoom and big definition. Then we will come all the other photographs of the Hermitage excavation and all the pictures taken by Sonneron during his exploration of the city of Esna. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Let me welcome Dr. Hisham El-Laisi and Professor Lights for the presentation of the restoration of the Esna Temple. ثانية واحدة هخفي دي.